Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of the Emerald Coast. My name is Josh Ashley, a member and your service leader this morning. I'm going to be honest with you. My heart is heavy today. I won't sugarcoat this. Like many of you, I saw masked secret police murder a human being in cold blood on the streets yesterday. He was a nurse at the VA. He was someone's son. So yeah, I'm angry this morning, and most of all, profoundly sad. We come here because this is our religious community. Despite all of our many differences, we come together in solidarity because the world is too overwhelming to face alone. And we should remember that this chalice was literally created as a symbol of resistance against Nazi repression during the Second World War. These are dark days. We are challenged to again be a light in the darkness. So before we move into our normal service, I just want to begin with a moment of prayer and silent reflection for the events occurring in Minnesota and for everyone who is suffering under and fighting against tyranny and authoritarianism. Okay, announcements are listed at the end of the order of service. And after our service, we will have our second hour classes. There's a correction. Instead of healing from religious trauma in the library, we will have Who Are You by Deborah Baker Ryan. In addition to that, we will have Learn to Crochet by Alex in the stage room, speaker circle in front of the sanctuary, and choir practice in the harmony room. And please consider staying for refreshments in the back immediately following the service. And now Cecile will lead us in the prelude. I'd like to invite Olivia up for lighting our chalice. We call forth the life of our faith by igniting our chalice. This spark of new beginnings invites us into a sacred space to reflect where we have been and where we are going. Even knowing that this particular flame will intentionally end with our ritual extinguishing, we fear not its end. For we know with brave hearts that from every ending of our lives, we are sent forth to make a new beginning. And now some words from Kathy Hurt.
I'm sending my words this morning from Virginia, where we are anticipating a foot of snow. Needless to say, I think I'd rather be with you right now. But I'm glad to be joining you across distance. And even with that distance, I believe our hearts and spirits are always connected. The opening words this morning are adapted from Gretchen Haley. Give up the fight for some other moment, some other life, rather than here and now. Give up the longing for some other world, the wishing for other choices to make, other songs to sing, other bodies, other ages, other countries. Surrender only to this life, this hour, this day. Not because it does not constantly break your heart, but because it also beckons with beauty, startles with delight, if only we keep waking up this breath, this life, these friends, this hope. Here, we remember ourselves, all a part of it all, giving thanks.
Please rise and bow your spirit for hymn number 1015, I Know I Can. It is in the blue hymnal, and the words should be behind me as well. like to invite the kids to come forward for our Time for All Ages, which will be read by Ivy Light.
Morning. I have another book for us today. Today's book is The 100th Name by Shulamith Levi Oppenheim and illustrated by Michael Hayes. Far back in time, in a land where kings were once called pharaohs and the great river is still called the Nile, a boy in a tiny village by the banks of this river was very sad. Salah wasn't sad because he lived in a house of sun-dried mud brick. This was good. Mud brick is cool in the summer and warm in the winter. There was space for everyone, for his mother and father and 5 older sisters, for the 3 baby she-goats and their mother, for the dark brown burro and light brown legs and tail, for the 2 puppies with pointed noses and pyramid ears. He wasn't sad because of the bad weather. The sky was always blue. The clouds, when there were clouds, were pink and violet. In his father's fields of wheat and barley, clover and maize, the sun kept the crops green and growing. River water flowed through the troughs of black earth that penciled the fields. Salah had helped his father dig these ditches to irrigate the land. This morning, Salah sat by the water's edge under a low date palm, its fronds brushing the ground. He watched the feluccas with slim, high sail float lazily up and down the river. Beside him was a camel. It was because of this camel that he was so sad. The camel's name was Kadim, Ancient One. But Kadim wasn't ancient at all. He was 7, going on 8. Born just a few weeks before Salah in June. Salah's father had named him so because a camel looks old when it's born. My son, look at him. Look at the camels in the village. They all look the same, only their size changes. When Salah looked into Kadim's face, he saw that his father spoke the truth, but he saw something else, sadness. Do you hang your head because you're sad, Kadim? The boy rubbed his cheek against the camel's hump. Is this why all camels hang their heads? The camel nuzzled Salah's leg. The boy didn't move. On a sandbank in the middle of the river, the green shanks and wagtails darted beneath and around gray herons standing motionless against the reeds. It was a beautiful day, but Salah couldn't enjoy it. Kadim wasn't happy, and of all the animals, Salah loved his camel best. They worked together, they slept together, they were brothers. What's wrong with you, Salah? His father came out from behind a stalk of maize. You're getting to be like this camel, hanging your head, dragging along. He accompanied his words with a lightning twist and an ear of corn and a quick downward pull on the husk. It's all right, Kadim, Salah patted the camel's nose. You know how father is. He couldn't get on without you. None of us could. Kadim always dropped his lids when he understood. Now his eyes were nearly closed. Salah touched the bony growths on Kadim's knees. They came from kneeling and rising with great loads on his back. All camels had them. If only there were some way of making Kadim feel happy and special, then the camel would stand tall and proud. It was noon. Salah's father stopped picking maize and untied his prayer rug from behind Kadim's hump. He prayed 5 times a day. In a few years, Salah would do the same. Camel and boy watched as the man unrolled the rug, shook it out, and laid it reverently on the ground. Then he raised a hand toward the sky. Prayer, Salah, has the greatest power. It is a gift we must all use, for Allah is good. He listens, he understands. And Salah's father dropped to his knees, touched his forehead to the rug, and then, stretching himself out full length, kissed its edge, stood up, and prayed. Prayer has great power. Allah wished all his creatures to be happy. Salah's father had told him this many times. Allah would never wish a camel to be as sad as Kadim and all the other camels. If only Allah could make Kadim happy. Salah's father was weaving slowly back and forth, hands folded by his waist and eyes shut. Finally, prayers were over. Salah jumped up. He would tell his father, "I'm sad, father, because Kadim is sad." "And why, silly one, is Kadim sad?" The man smiled down at his son. "This boy, always worrying about the animals." "Well, why not?" To be kind is best, even if Salah did go too far with this obstinate, stupid, ugly beast of theirs. A tiny lizard was stirring up a small dust storm by Salah's toes, searching out a way around the boy's feet. "You'll laugh, father, but I think he's sad because he does look old, even though he's only 7, like me. No one in the village could get on without camels, but everyone makes fun of them. That's why they hang their heads and drag along. They all feel the same way. I know they do." Kadim shut his eyes and began chewing his cud noisily. Salah put his arms around his father's legs and hugged him. "There must be something we can do so that," he looked up at his father, who at a moment seemed to soar upward like a felucca's mast, "so that Kadim will be happy and hold up his head, tall and proud." Salah shuffled his foot in the earth, sending the lizard scuttling off. "Like you, father, so that all camels will be happy and proud." "I don't laugh at you, my son. Your heart is speaking. But one cannot have everything. Kadim rests under the shade of the date palm tree, queen of trees. He eats cakes made from crushed stones of her fruit, the date. He sleeps by your side. He has love. Think." And loosening his son's arms, he sat down cross-legged against the tree and drew Salah close. "Here on earth, we poor mortals must live and die knowing only 99 names for Allah, our God, though there are, in truth, 100 names, and the last one is the most important. And do we walk about dejected, head down, shuffling our feet? No! We work, we eat, we care for each other. We try to be happy as Allah wishes us to be. And," he raised his hand to the sky as he had done earlier, "we pray." Then Salah's father got up and went back to his field. Kadim opened his eyes very wide, looked straight at Salah, and then shut them till his lashes disappeared, and Salah looked straight back at him. Later that night, when the household slept and Salah lay next to Kadim, his father's words drummed in his head, keeping sleep away. "Prayer has great power, my son. It is a gift we must all use. Allah is good. He listens. He understands. Allah wishes his creatures to be happy. But we poor mortals must live and die without knowing Allah's 100th and most important name." What if Kadim could be told Allah's 100th name? And suddenly Salah knew what he must do. Kadim stirred. Salah slipped his galibaya. This is an article of clothing. Over his head. "Sleep," the boy whispered to the camel. "I'll be back soon." He crept to the corner of the room where his father's prayer rug lay tightly rolled against the wall. Outside, the moon was new, like the water buffalo's horn. Salah hurried toward the river, the rug bouncing across his neck. By the water, branches of a sycamore tree hung low, weighted down with egrets sleeping. Salah laid out the rug. Then, as he had seen his father do so many times before, he prayed. his thin body moving back and forth gracefully as if he had been before performing these rites his whole life long. He prayed to Allah with all of his strength. The next morning, after Salah had eaten flat bread and drunk a cup of warm goat's milk, he ran outside. His father was adjusting the basket saddle in front of Kadim's hump. "Have a look at that camel of yours," the man was shaking his head in wonder. "Allah only knows what came over him in the night." Salah saw immediately that Kadim was standing proud and tall, his incredibly long neck curved towards the sky and his head held erect. And on his face a look of not only happiness, but Salah's heart gave a thump, a look of infinite wisdom. Salah whispered to Kadim, "You know the name?" And in the softest whisper, "Allah's 100th name?" The camel's heavy lids drooped. "But you're not to tell, I promised Allah." Kadim agreed with the slightest movement of his head, "Only to other camels." Salah's father patted his son's cheek. "Go along. I've weeding to do in the walled garden. Ma salam. Go in peace, both of you," he smiled. "Whatever touched Kadim in the night, God is great. Allah Akbar." Kadim started for the fields. His step was quick, light. He fairly ran, and Salah, one hand on Kadim's neck, skipped beside him. And this is why I think the camel has the look it does. For while man knows only 99 names for Allah, the camel knows the 100th name, and he was never told. The end. I think we can all agree that although we have different definitions of what prayer and meditation is, that it's one of those few things that keeps us connected to the earth, to ourselves, and to each other. So thank you.
A revered tradition Every Sunday, we take an offering to share our material resources in furtherance of our mission with generosity and gratitude. If you're paying your pledge by check, please write pledge in the memo line so we can better keep track of it. But we also have a tradition of sharing the cash offering and all undesignated checks with a local charity. This week, that charity is Shelter House. The confidential emergency shelter houses up to 36 adults and children with outreach offices located in Fort Walton Beach, Crestview, and Defuniak Springs. In addition to services provided to victims and survivors of domestic and sexual violence, Shelter House offers community education and holds training sessions for professionals who work with domestic and sexual violence victims, including law enforcement, mental health counselors, and advocates at partner agencies. Shelter House is the only certified domestic and sexual violence center serving Okaloosa and Walton counties. Please be generous. Slight change to the ordering this morning. I just realized I passed over the meditation and prayer. Both the meditation and prayer and our sermon will be delivered by Rev Kathy, who will be with us in person next month.
Please join now in a spirit of reflection, meditation, and prayer. Embracing Spirit, help us recognize that polarization can also be understood as passion to build something better that holds all of us at the center. Help us to imagine and to foster a world in which we listen more than we talk, where our priority is to learn as much as teach. A world in which we find ways to connect across the chasms of difference, making space for revelation to emerge. Spirit of love, Help us turn toward love with the world, with each other, with ourselves, all the same thing at its core. Let us extend grace within our movements and between our movements, less sure, more curious, wondering together what is possible. May it be so. Amen. I grew up enveloped by images of the world ending. Every Sunday, as my family attended morning and evening services at our small town Southern Baptist Church, I heard about the inevitability of the entire world coming to a sudden and terrifying end, replete with chaos and destruction that would result when all life ended and souls were transported to heaven or hell for judgment. I lived in a part of Texas favored by hurricanes, and twice we endured a direct hit by a hurricane that, while not utterly destroying our little world, did wreak a fair amount of havoc with flooding and downed trees, snakes washed ashore from the many bayous around us. And my father brought into our home an atmosphere of impending world's end that was the result of his having grown up in a family marred by frequent loss and tragedy, so much so that he sought to build a lifestyle to protect all of us from the dangers he believed were ever present and overwhelming. Most spiritual traditions include stories and beliefs about both the beginning of the world and its ending. Some present these ideas as literal. Others intend these ideas of a world's end to be understood metaphorically as images of a complete change or of a conversion that alters everything. Whether literal or metaphorical, spiritual teachings about the end of the world are rich in imaginative detail as they lay out unusual landscapes, powerful beings, rivers and lakes of fire, hordes of demons, choirs of angels, battles that unfold across the entire universe. While poet T.S. Eliot might have anticipated that the world ends not with a bang but a whimper, spiritual visions head in the opposite direction, so that world endings are events of great drama. Our individual life journeys will likely lead us, whether we want or not, through experiences of having our own personal worlds end. I've lived through the ends of my own worlds when primary relationships broke apart, when I fell into the pit of depression, when my son left home for college, each time I left a congregation to serve elsewhere. Regardless of whether I saw my world endings as natural and desirable or unwanted, and what I wanted to avoid, the end was always painful, dislocating, and risky, because I had to discern when to let go so the ending could proceed because it needed to happen, or when I should maybe fight against that ending. And as the ending unfolded, I had to further discern when to grab some means of stepping out of it, some escape route, or whether it was best for me to remain where I was, let the world end, because by remaining where I was, I could then be ready for new possibilities to emerge. In other words, was the ending just an ending, or was it the sort of ending that precedes a beginning? That same Baptist church, which taught us about the end of the world, also taught that our beliefs would provide us protection from personal ends of worlds we might encounter through a pervasive hardship or loss, as well as how to deal with the universal end of the world that was coming with the Last Judgment. In other words, if we had the right beliefs, we could count on a life without harm or suffering. And if harm or suffering came our way, then we were to see that as a signal that our beliefs had gone awry, that we were not right with God. To use the metaphor of a crack in a pervading perspective, any cracks in the teaching we learned of how right living meant happiness and safety were to be seen as occasions of a wrong, to use the metaphor of a crack in a pervading perspective, any cracks in the teaching we learned of how right living would bring us happy and safety, we were to see those cracks as occasions of a wrong belief that needed to be corrected in order to go back to a state of happiness and safety. Stories, which are what our beliefs are ultimately, they are stories. Stories that keep us protected may be the most impregnable, the least susceptible to cracking, and therefore the most likely to interfere with possible spiritual growth, which seems like a paradox because it would seem that beliefs foster spiritual growth, but beliefs also can interfere with spiritual growth. And whether those belief stories come from a fundamentalist church, come from a consumer culture, come from a vision of white supremacy, whether those are stories that have become embedded in how this congregation views itself, any story which allows for minimizing differences and avoiding difficult change and maintaining power, that is a story that is hard to step out of, hard to crack open, and see how much reality it actually obscures, even though it tells us it explains. When a crack does appear, the first responses are likely to be responses that seek to cover it. We will do almost anything to hold off change, even when the change is in our best interest. And we will do almost anything, especially to hold off overwhelming change, the end of a world we have known. And yet all around us, on a daily basis, the world we have known is ending. The current ending we are in the midst of, which has likely been underway for quite some time, accelerated during the pandemic, when we experienced the end of a world in which we believed we could move about freely and without risk. And that cracked open the story we had been telling ourselves so that we could see how little control we have over anything, how our control can be completely thwarted by a microbe. Our Unitarian Universalist commitment to ongoing anti-racist work keeps prying cracks in a story that comforts us with reassurances about all the good justice work we do, and therefore we don't need to look at our own hearts to see the biases that reside there. And now, day after day, we watch fundamental rights and foundational elements of our democratic system, the story we have told ourselves about our democratic system, being broken and disregarded, people herded up and disappeared, peaceful protesters being tear-gassed and shot, threats of prosecution against anyone who dares to disagree with such decisions, and many days it seems our world ending is just as complete an ending as those stories spiritual traditions told us of worlds ending with great battles and fires and destruction. Worlds ending all around us, and and we can scramble to seal up the cracks in the smooth stories that allow us to feel safe and comfortable and unchanged. We can run for escape routes to be anywhere but here in the midst of all this brokenness. Or we can stand fast, maybe even contribute to the cracking open by asking questions like, what is going on here? Questions that refuse to settle for simple explanations that would paint things in terms of us and them, all bad and all good. And if we do that and ask those questions and refuse to settle for simple answers, we are consenting to the end of the world. When an especially powerful hurricane was set to strike the part of Texas where we lived, my parents took my siblings and I to the local Baptist church for shelter, figuring we would be safer there in this great stone edifice than we would be in our little frame house. My memories of that time in the church waiting out the hurricane are happy ones, despite the obvious anxiety all the adults sheltering there were holding as we listened to the winds howl and the rains beat on the roof. In contrast to how I usually experienced that church on Sundays, when I had to sit still and quiet and listen to scary sermons about the world ending and an angry God and a sinful humanity, being in the church during the hurricane was a wonderful change. My siblings and I were allowed to run in the sanctuary, playing tag and hide and seek, wending in and out of the pews and being as loud as we wanted. We had our pick of toys in the nursery, of art supplies in the classrooms. We were free to stay up as late as we wanted. We dined on picnic food, even for breakfast, because there was no electricity for cooking. At one point, my father gathered us to go outside, where, much to my surprise, everything was quiet and still. No wind, no rain, beautiful blue sky above. My father explained that this was the eye of the hurricane, a small place of peace in the midst of an overwhelming storm. And he said we should never assume when the eye came over that the hurricane was done with us. Instead, it would always return, often more fiercely than before. I find myself noticing how often we want to believe the storm is done. The world has already ended, and now is the time to clean up and rebuild, only then to have a whole new round of destruction unfold. In our justice work, we have repeatedly celebrated when action is taken to correct injustice, and for a time things are quiet until the next atrocity happens. We work our way through turmoil in our personal lives. We reach a place of stability and want to believe, finally, we're set. And then the other shoe drops on our heads. We celebrate the arrival of new members in our congregation and settle down to be the same congregation we've always been, and then realize how comfortable ways of doing things are being changed because of those new members and the ideas they bring. The eye of a storm is deceptive, as my father wanted us to know. We will always be tempted to believe that maybe, just maybe, the world need not end entirely for needed change to come. But if we are serious about really wanting change, if we earnestly believe the story we've been telling and living in The story about our community and racism, about our church and our desire for a diverse congregation, about our own lives and our intention to live with wonder and joy and open-hearted engagement, if we are really serious, then we will necessarily have to accept that when the story is taken apart, when cracks in the smooth lacquer that surrounds and protects and allows us to be safe develop, and we don't rush to patch them, but instead push at them, widen them, we will find more of the storm coming, more disruption, more discomfort, more uncertainty, more time to live through before the new world, which will emerge from the breakup of the old world, finally becomes clear and trustworthy. And how we draw upon our gift of imagination will be crucial as we navigate the end of a familiar world. Already we can see around us what the imagination constructs when it bends in the direction of polarization, mistrust, dividing us into tribal groupings, closing ranks, excluding anyone who does not look and sound and think like anyone else. Harder to see is what the imagination constructs when it bends in the direction of justice and inclusion, in the direction of trust and a willingness to disagree and be in conflict and stay engaged and stay open. Those beautiful imaginary new worlds come slowly. They emerge in fits and starts. They require care and tenderness if they're not to be stomped out by all that resists world endings and the change they bring. The stillness of the eye eventually began to give way to the stirring of wind, and we retreated back inside the dark church. That taste of peaceful weather made it hard to keep huddled. All of us began to just want to go home. But the experience of the hurricane eye also brought a needed infusion of hope. That calm blue sky reminded us that there was a world beyond the hurricane and that the storm would not last forever. Which are reminders we need whenever we find ourselves confronting the ruins of our lives, whether the ending was a chosen one or one that came upon us without warning and not by choice. Even those who preach a literal end of the world never claim that the ending is actually the ending, the last chapter after which there is nothing. Whether with hurricanes, visions of Armageddon, community uprisings, conflicts in a church, or an experience of loss that feels like an end of the world, the message of world ending is a consistent one. Destruction and division is not the last word. New worlds do come into being. New lives are possible, however impossible that may seem at the moment. The end of the world is not, in the end, the absolute end. For out beyond the world's end, imagination can see a world where tears are wiped away, where pain no longer exists, where equity for all prevails, where the sacred is always present among us. And if we can imagine such a world, then somewhere inside us is the capacity to bring that imaginary world into reality, not single-handedly, but working with one another, listening and cooperating and disagreeing and coming together again and again over time as we follow a vision too compelling to resist a world without end. May it be so. Amen.
Please rise and body your spirit for hymn number 121, We'll Build a Land. You'll find the words in the blue hymnal as well as on the screen behind me. Having let go, set our intentions, named our curiosity, committed our energies, and given ourselves over to lives of balance, purpose, and meaning, let us begin again in love. And our benediction will again be given by Reverend Kathy.
It was good to be with all of you this morning. I'm looking forward to the middle of February when I will be with you in person, and I'll be with you for the Sunday service on February 15th. Until then, I hope you stay well. I hope you find moments of peace in your days, and I hope you are able to feel and strengthen the connections we all have with one another. The closing words are by Peter Rabel. We build on foundations we did not lay. We warm ourselves at fires we did not light. We drink from wells we did not dig. We sit in the shade of trees we did not plant. We profit from persons we never knew. All our lives, we are always bound in community. Shalom, salam, namaste, blessed be, amen.
Please remain seated for the postlude and then join us in the back for refreshments and for second hour classes. Thank you.